Welcome to Military Matrix. If in Episode 1, we witnessed the beginning of a catastrophic drama, an intricate garage theater staged in Iran, designed by Beijing to lure Washington into an unforeseen quagmire, then tonight, we will analyze Act 2 of this global tragedy. This is the moment the veil of proxy warfare is torn away, and the true, cold calculus of the superpowers is laid bare. Episode 1 was the bait. Episode 2 is the trap springing shut. The world is in an unprecedented state of chaos. The United States, the world's foremost military power, is deeply mired in Iran. What was promised as a lightning air campaign, a surgical strike to decapitate the Tehran regime following the false flag attack on a U.S. facility, has devolved into a bloody, grinding war of attrition. American resources are being incinerated on the deserts and mountains of Persia. Thousands of Tomahawk cruise missiles have been expended. Stockpiles of precision-guided munitions are depleting at an alarming rate. And in Washington, strategic fatigue has morphed into fury and impatience. Meanwhile, in Israel, America's closest regional ally, anxiety has reached a fever pitch. The threat from a chaotic Iran, even one battered by airstrikes, remains existential. Tehran's proxy forces, particularly Hezbollah in Lebanon, have not yet fully committed, but they are lurking on Israel's northern border, ready to unleash a salvo of hundreds of thousands of rockets. The Israeli leadership, sensing Washington's hesitation and resource strain, believes that without a decisive, finishing blow, their sworn enemy will never be subdued. The pressure to end the war mounts. A renewed war coalition is solidified between Washington and Tel Aviv. They decide that the previous limited airstrikes were insufficient. It is time to escalate, to break the backbone of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps (IRGC) once and for all. And so, the war enters a new, more brutal phase. The United States and Israel decide to relaunch the air campaign, but this time on a massive scale and with deeper objectives. This is no longer about striking known military bases. This is a decapitation campaign, hunting leadership, destroying clandestine research facilities, and attempting to paralyze the entire Iranian state apparatus. But the Iran of this phase is no longer the Iran of Episode 1. The garage theater had afforded its architects China and Russia more than enough time to heavily fortify the stage. When Israel's F-35 times, Adir times, and America's F-22 Raptor fighters tore into Iranian airspace, they did not meet an obsolete, shattered air defense network. They flew into a high-technology firewall. The stiff resistance they encounter is not merely from shoulder-fired missiles or aging batteries. Deployed across Iran, Russian volunteers are now manning the most advanced S-400 Triumph air defense batteries, expertly concealed in strategic locations. Krasuka-4 electronic warfare systems, deployed near sensitive sites, begin jamming GPS signals, blinding the guidance systems of JDAM smart bombs, and even disrupting the sophisticated AESA radars on the fifth-generation fighters themselves. For the first time since their operational debut, F-35s and F-22s begin to fall from the sky. Not in large numbers, but enough to send a profound psychological shockwave through the Allied command. Stealth pilots, accustomed to first look, first shot, first kill, now find themselves being locked up by advanced infrared search and track IRST systems, or ambushed by long-range air-to-air missiles cued by non-traditional, low-band radar networks acting as early warning systems. The air war becomes a lethal gamble, but the resistance is not limited to the sky. On the ground and at sea, Iran, now fueled by real-time intelligence from Russian and Chinese satellites, begins to hit back hard. The Strait of Hormuz, the world's oil artery, becomes a death trap. U.S. Fifth Fleet warships, operating in the confines of the Persian Gulf, are relentlessly harassed by swarms of suicide drones and Times Gadir *class mini-submarines. Russian-supplied Bastion P supersonic coastal defense missiles are deployed along the coast, creating a formidable anti-access area denial (AD) bubble that forces American carrier strike groups to operate from much further away, blunting the effectiveness of their sorties. The U.S.-Israeli escalation campaign has failed. Instead of breaking Iran's will, it has only stiffened its resistance. Washington and Tel Aviv are facing a strategic disaster. They cannot win, yet they cannot afford to retreat in disgrace. And it is precisely in this moment of maximum desperation, as the Tehran regime feels itself cornered, facing total annihilation from the relentless air campaign, that they do the unthinkable. A decision is made in a deep underground bunker in Tehran, or perhaps it is made in Moscow. Iran decides to use a tactical nuclear weapon. This is a turning point that alters human history. The question is not where Iran acquired the weapon, whether from a secret program finally completed in the chaos of war, or as a special gift from a northern ally, but that they dared to use it. The target is not U.S. forces in the Persian Gulf. That would be a direct declaration of war against a nuclear superpower, guaranteeing mutual annihilation. The target selected is the sworn enemy, the regional ally, and the nation Iran perceives as the spearhead of the assault, Israel. In a retaliatory ballistic missile salvo, a single, specially modified Shahab-3 or Ghadir-110 is launched. It does not carry a conventional warhead. It carries a low-yield tactical nuclear device, estimated at 10 to 15 kilotons. Israel's multi-layered Arrow 3 defense system, designed to intercept threats outside the atmosphere, is activated. Most of the conventional missiles in the salvo are successfully intercepted. But the fateful missile, perhaps equipped with advanced decoys and maneuvering technology, slips through. It does not target Tel Aviv or Jerusalem. Its target is, in many ways, more insidious. It targets Israel's primary nuclear and biological research center. Imagine a nuclear detonation at the Israel Institute for Biological Research in Ness Ziona, or near the Negev Nuclear Research Center near Dimona. The consequence is a nightmare scenario beyond all wargaming. A mushroom cloud rises over the Negev desert, signaling the first use of a nuclear weapon in warfare since 1945. But the catastrophe does not end with the immediate blast and radiation. As the scenario dictates, Israel faces a biological and nuclear catastrophe. The attack has ruptured the containment facilities of these research centers. A deadly radioactive plume begins to drift toward populated centers. Simultaneously, the most dangerous pathogens known to man, perhaps weaponized strains of anthrax, smallpox, or other genetically engineered viruses, are released into the environment. Israel, a small, densely populated nation, is instantly paralyzed. Its government faces two existential crises at once: a massive radiological contamination zone and an uncontrollable biological outbreak. The healthcare system collapses. The military, instead of fighting in Iran, is now forced to turn inward, enforcing draconian quarantines on its own soil. Tel Aviv faces oblivion. Globally, the reaction is one of absolute horror. But the condemnation is not aimed solely at Iran. Much of the world, particularly the global south, also points the finger at the United States and Israel for instigating and escalating the war, pushing Tehran into this desperate, unthinkable act. In Washington, the Capitol and the White House are in total shock. The American public, already weary of the Iranian war, is now utterly horrified to find itself on the brink of a global nuclear conflagration. All political will to continue the war in the Middle East evaporates within hours. The mission is no longer regime change in Iran. The mission is immediate de-escalation and salvaging whatever is left. The U.S. and Israel have lost. They have suffered a catastrophic defeat, not on a traditional battlefield, but on the chessboard of strategic escalation. They are forced to withdraw. The Fifth Fleet retreats from the Persian Gulf in humiliation. American bases in the region are shuttered. U.S. influence in the Middle East, built over 50 years, has collapsed overnight. And as the Americans leave, Iran, though battered by the initial air campaign, begins to recover with surprising speed. Why? Because its patrons Russia and China step in, not as invaders, but as reconstructors and protectors. Billions in aid and thousands of engineers from Beijing and Moscow pour into Iran, rebuilding its shattered infrastructure. A comprehensive military and economic alliance, a true strategic axis, is formally forged between Tehran, Moscow, and Beijing. Iran has not only survived, it has emerged stronger, now firmly under the protection of America's two greatest rivals. And precisely at this moment, as the entire world, every news channel, every diplomat, every Western intelligence structure is fixated on the nuclear and biological catastrophe unfolding in Israel. as the President of the United States is locked in the Situation Room, managing the single hottest nuclear crisis in decades. At that very moment, on the other side of the world, the true trap of the Garage Theater springs shut. Beijing had waited for this exact moment of maximum distraction. They had used Iran as a giant sacrificial pawn to completely fixate America's attention and drain its military resources. Now, with their rival politically paralyzed, militarily depleted, and psychologically shattered, China launches the campaign it has prepared for decades: the invasion of Taiwan. The invasion begins not with a gunshot, but with a digital silence. 2 a.m. Taipei time. A comprehensive cyber attack, arguably the most sophisticated in human history, plunges Taiwan's power grid into darkness. The internet is severed. Military and government communication systems are paralyzed. Immediately following, the skies west of Taiwan ignite. Thousands of People's Liberation Army ballistic and cruise missiles are launched in a single, overwhelming saturation strike. This is not a limited attack. This is an attempt to annihilate Taiwan's ability to resist in the first hour. DF-17 hypersonic missiles target the mountaintop early warning radar stations. DF-16 and DF-21 ballistic missiles, carrying cluster munitions, crater every runway at key air bases in Hualien, Taichung, and Chiayi. CJ-10 cruise missiles strike command centers, ammunition depots, and naval ports at Keelung and Zhuoying. Taiwan's porcupine strategy, predicated on surviving the first blow to mount a sustained defense, is neutralized before it can even raise its quills. As the missiles are still falling, the PLA's overwhelming naval force begins to move. Dozens of Type 075 amphibious assault ships and Type 071 transport docks, carrying tens of thousands of Marines, steam out of ports in Fujian and Guangdong, charging across the Taiwan Strait. Above them, hundreds of J-20, J-16, and J-10 fighters from the PLA Air Force fly in waves, establishing an absolute no-fly zone. And the tacit Russian support now becomes overt. While the PLA attacks from the west, Russian nuclear submarines are detected east of Taiwan, interdicting any attempt by Japanese or U.S. submarines to intervene. Russian electronic warfare aircraft patrol in the north, near Japanese airspace, jamming the sensors of the Japanese self-defense forces and U.S. bases on Okinawa. At the United Nations, Russia and China jointly veto any resolution condemning the invasion, calling it an internal matter and blaming Western interference for the global instability, pointing to the crisis in Iran. Taiwan fights bravely. Surviving F-16V pilots managed to scramble from highway strips, shooting down several enemy aircraft before being overwhelmed by sheer numbers. Mobile Xiongfeng missile batteries launch and manage to hit a few PLA transport ships, but it is not enough. It is a fight between a heavyweight and a featherweight. The Western powers, as the scenario predicted, cannot intervene. They are completely paralyzed. America, as stated, is managing an active nuclear crisis in the Middle East. The American public and Congress, terrified of nuclear war, have zero political will to engage in a second, even larger conventional war against a nuclear-armed China over a distant island. The USS Ronald Reagan Carrier Strike Group, the only fleet in the vicinity, receives conflicting orders. The admirals at Pacific Fleet want to intervene, but the White House, deep in crisis management, orders them to hold position and avoid escalation. Without American air and naval support, Japan and Australia cannot act alone. China takes Taiwan, and does so quickly. Within 48 hours, PLA Special Forces, airdropped into Taipei, have stormed the presidential office building. Within 72 hours, the main amphibious forces have established secure beachheads at Taoyuan and Tainan. Within 1 week, organized resistance from the Taiwanese military has collapsed. The island has fallen. The fallout from this action shakes the world, perhaps even more than the nuclear attack in Iran. The US-led world order, carefully constructed since 1945, is officially over. In Asia, Japan and South Korea enter a state of absolute panic. The American security guarantee, the nuclear umbrella they had relied upon for decades, has been proven worthless. They realized that, when the crisis came, when the chips were down, America did not come. The fear of unstoppable Chinese expansion grips the region. A frantic arms race begins immediately. Tokyo and Seoul begin serious, open public debates about developing their own independent nuclear deterrence, realizing they can trust no one but themselves. In Washington, the pressure from allies becomes unbearable. The European nations, Japan, South Korea, Australia, all are demanding answers. How could America fail on two fronts simultaneously? How could it allow one ally, Israel, to be hit with a nuclear weapon and another, Taiwan, to be wiped off the map? America's credibility as a global leader is destroyed. The Garage Theater, which began in Episode 1 as a simple false flag in Tehran, has now revealed its true, horrifying purpose. It was never about Iran. Iran was just a pawn, a strategic sacrifice. The true target was always Taiwan. China has played a masterful game of chess, sacrificing a regional player to distract its global rival and capture the ultimate prize. The world has entered a new, dark era. A multipolar world order has arrived, not one of balance, but one defined by ruthless aggression and cold, hard geopolitical calculus. The Matrix has been reset. Thank you for watching Military Matrix.